You are listening to the Mindset Forge podcast. I'm Barton Bryan, your host, interviewing athletes and performing artists on how they show up for the big moments. Now, today I'm interviewing a Broadway performer, somebody who's been touring with Disney for several years, LA Opera, does a lot of different things, and has really carved out an entire career for himself as a performer. So great conversation with Tonoccus McClain. That's coming up in just a few minutes. Before I kick that off, though, I do want to talk about the tour that I'm about to be a part of. It happens this spring. It's called the Endure Tour. It's going to be in 4 cities. It starts in the spring. I'm going to be a part of it with people like Cameron Haynes, Nick Bear, Phil DeRue, Nate Boyer, myself, Mitch Royer. And here's the cool thing. It's not just a concert where you get to hear us talk. It's actually then after that, a big workout that I'll be running with Nick, with Cam, and lots of people out on a football field or a big arena space. We'll be having an awesome boot camp style workout, a way for all of us to come together and pushing ourselves to be the best we possibly can be. That's all coming up in the spring. Details to follow. You can go to the website. It's theendurotour.com and just check out some preliminary information. The dates aren't set yet, but I promise you they'll be in that kind of April, May, June time frame at several different cities across the United States. So that's huge. That's coming up. That's a big part of my 2023. Well, hey, you're listening to the Mindset Forge. Let me dive in here with Tonoccus McClain. Guy just finished an LA Opera production of Omar, a story of an emancipated slave. He was able to actually write his own autobiography while he was a slave. So that was turned into an opera. So he was a part of that. But before that, he did 6 years with Disney, traveling with the tour of The Lion King. And so we talk about his work with Disney, his work on the opera, a lot of other things, and his perspective on being an actor, being a singer, a performer, and the endurance to be able to perform 8 shows a week. That's basically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then 2 shows on Saturday, 2 shows on Sunday, and 1 day off. And just the incredible endurance it takes to do that, especially with a show like The Lion King. So buckle up, enjoy my interview with my friend Tonoccus McClain. All right, I am here with Tonoccus McClain, a friend, an inspiration, because he is one of those guys who is a true triple threat: singer, actor, Broadway, dancing. We'll talk about all that stuff. Amazing human being. Just a friend of mine from back in college, which is so many years ago. It's kind of, you don't want to bring it up. But fortunately, you and I we figured out how not to age, because you look exactly the same. And I want to say I do too, but that's not quite true. But anyway, let's kick this off. Tonoccus, first of all, how you doing, big guy?
I am doing great, and I have to admit that I have, in my heart of hearts, ever since you started this podcast, I was like, well, is he ever going to ask me to be on it? Because, I mean, it was, it's a serious deal. It really is. And, I mean, you get some heavy hitters on this program, and so I was like, well, then I'll know, I'm really doing something right when Bart asked me to be a part of his podcast. And lo and behold, it happened. The moment came finally. I'm doing great.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's like, I can imagine that you're thinking like, oh, he's interviewed Andrea. He's interviewed like who else?
I'm sure.
Who else in the music department?
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't have those thoughts whatsoever. No, but it was super easy, because
it's like, assumed you're so busy on tour all the time that you have no time.
What's funny is that
of, jib jab.
I actually love this, and this will be the 3rd podcast that I've done in a very short period of time, with another one on the way. So I guess now is the time for podcasts in my life. I don't know. But going back to what we were just talking about, it helped that every single person that you had on your podcast, they were like top of their game, just freaking huge. It would be one thing if it was like, Morty down the block. Oh, he asked Morty to be on his podcast, but didn't want me on, So I totally understood, all of the guests made sense. It's a really solid program, and I am honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, I am honored that you're on, because this is, and you're on a list of people that I'm like, because the first thing you do when you start a podcast is you kind of make a dream list, like, who are the people that I don't even think I could get, and then who are like the people I know who are like in the industry that, and so this is perfect timing too.
Awesome.
Well,
it's nice
give us a background Yeah, you want to be on a list.
Right.
And but give us a background, like what you've got a long career in the
Right.
world of theater and Broadway and other things too. L.A. being some TV and such. Give me just an update of what you're up to right now, and maybe some excitement things that are going on with you.
Let's see. Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I realized that there's a lot about my past and my career that you don't actually know about. I mean, and that's kind of the weird part about my particular career is that it's so varied. I'm like the personification of jack of all trades. And I
Mm,
actually think that's a good thing. I think that's the reason why I've lasted in Los Angeles as long as I have, because I'm so interested in so many things, and I've gotten good enough in enough things so that when one thing fell apart, something else was just ready to start, taking over, and just kind of like in a relay race, handing the baton, to the next career to get me to this point, and I actually love it. I've spoken to people about my experience. And, when you talk to people who've had the same job for, like my mother, she's had the same job my entire life, like the same schedule. She's woken up at the same time and 5 days a week, 9 to 5 for 40 something years. She's about to retire. God bless her. But I could not have that experience. I've never had a 9 to 5 job before. And I respect the people who do, but for me, I mean, on the one hand, I typically get bored really easily, and so for me to sit in the same seat and do the same thing for 40 years, there's really no way. So, kind of my career's kind of evolved from that kind of place, but I'm just going to go back to like high school just to give you an idea
yeah.
what got me to Los Angeles. Because again, I was like, Bart doesn't really know, does he? I haven't spent a lot of time. We were in choir
Because
together.
we were required together in the music department, but I knew that you and a few others from the department that came in right around the same time had kind of similar high school experiences, but I don't think I ever heard yours.
Right, right. Well, mine is different. Well, I was in the arts growing up. My mom says that I was singing before I could speak. So, and I could, yeah, that totally that totally scans with how important singing and music has always been in my life and my existence. It kind of it's intermingled with my idea of self, which, towards like some parts in the Lion King tour when I was having like problems with my voice, that really became an issue because when your idea of self is so intertwined with a physical thing, then when that physical thing starts going away, you go into this existential crisis. Well, who am I if I'm not my voice? What else do I have to offer? So it's like finding who you were in spite of the physical. That and then when the
Hmm.
physical came back, then I just feel it's even more like I'm more in sync with the whole Tonoccus than I was ever before. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So
So let's
music,
stay there because I mean
yeah,
that's such a great point because that is a very similar thing that I've heard a lot of athletes talk about, especially athletes that made a career or got very far into the sport of being an athlete. It's like how they once that thing ended, who were they? What was
right.
their value if they weren't doing the thing that got them so much value?
And when
And
I was
so,
on
yeah,
tour,
that is a parallel
I
type
mean, absolutely.
mindset, a challenge.
People don't realize that singing is it's like a form of athleticism. Athleticism. It's very physical, and it's surprisingly so when people try to do auditions for musicals or whatever, and you have to sing for 2 hours, and then you're dancing, and then you're being funny, and you're trying to make it look like you're not. I saw this special on I believe it was like ESPN or something, where they measured the heart rate of the guy who plays the genie in Aladdin. And he's a bigger guy. Seeing
Yeah.
him walking down the street, you wouldn't think of him as an athlete, but he absolutely is. And what they saw, I mean, don't quote me on this, but something like his heart rate was like he was running a marathon, and as they were getting closer to curtain going up, then his heart started going faster, and he started getting physically in the place where he could do what he had to do. And then they like measured it during like Friend Like Me, and it was, I mean, off the charts. Everyone can go Google this special, but it when I watched that, I was like, yep, I know exactly what that is. It's really remarkable. It is a form of athleticism. And seeing the dancers, up front, especially in The Lion King, because that was really mowing through the dancers. I injured myself and I was in the singing track. So you can imagine what the dancers were going through. There was a dancer who was there from the very beginning of the tour. And so by the time I joined in, I was there for the 10-year anniversary of the tour. And he'd still been there. And at that point, he wasn't made of any natural parts. He was just all like the bionic man, just hanging in there until he finally had to be let go, because he wouldn't leave on his own. He just loved it that much. But man, watching him sometimes like stretching, it's like, how you look like you're in so much pain. My goodness, save yourself. Great guy, but it's a very physical thing, and so yeah, to relate it to being an athlete, it's spot on, because we're there sweating too, definitely.
I got to see you in The Lion King when you came to Austin, and
that's right.
We'll talk about the other part of that story a little later.
Mean, I
if
will
we
always
can remember it.
Exactly, I will always treasure that memory. When you were on tour.
Well, let me say this. We, so my wife and I came and saw you in the show. I think this is before my son was born. But it was just like from the very get go, it's like coming down the aisles and the dancing and the singing and it's just full tilt for
Absolutely.
2.5 hours. And it's amazing. Right. And so that gave me a whole different, knowing you, really kind of like tracking you throughout, because you're playing a lot of different roles and kind of in the chorus, and you're singing and doing a lot of physicality. It's just like really got to see just that, that athleticism and that kind of, that overall just kind of full tilt, like embrace of the, that show does for you. And so that was really cool, because it was just, I'd been in operas and other shows that had, that were 3 hours long and this kind of thing. But I think something about Lion King, Disney, it's just so visceral. It's so, there's so much energy and like movement, because I think that really depicts that story in a sense.
When you said full tilt embrace, I was like, that is exactly it. You have to be committed 100% to what's about to happen to you. And I've never in my life, before or since, been in the situation where right before I go on stage, I'm like hanging on to the wall. I'm empty, exhausted. I'm like, it's impossible. I will not be able to go out there and do, my knees, my legs have to come up here, sprinting around in a circle and hit the steps and the marks. It's just not going to happen. And then my cue, and then suddenly I find myself doing it. It's like reaching deeper than you realize you had and finding a way. And through that experience, I learned that we're capable of so much more than we would have ever imagined if we'd listened to our brains. That voice in our heads, it has no idea what we're capable of. And so shut it off and just do it, And I was amazed every single time, like sore from working out, maybe I was hungover from drinking, because that's what we do on tour. But just thinking seriously, it is impossible for me to do what I have to do in 30 seconds. And I'd be counting down, okay, here it comes, 20, 10. And then suddenly I'm doing it. And afterwards, right. I'm like, holy, it's insane what's possible.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember the moment on tour when I realized exactly what I'd signed on for. It was the first week of my first city in Norfolk, Virginia. And I remember maybe day 6, walking into the dressing room, and I was like, I'm exhausted. We still have to do this 4 more times or 3 more times this week? And they're like, yeah, 8 shows a week means 8 shows a week. And so I thought I understood, but there's nothing like the bone tired that you get in that kind of experience. It really made sense why so many people were in such a bad mood all the time, because they were exhausted. And we were more exhausted than we realized. I remember towards the end, someone was like, when you leave the tour, just rent a cabin in the woods and camp out there for 2 weeks and just sleep, because you don't realize how tired you are right now. It makes total sense.
Well, and that's being a professional too in this space. Is like it's one thing to be in like a regional theater. You've got a couple of shows. It's like you've worked really hard for this moment, and there's all this adrenaline and excitement, and your family's out in the audience, and like that's a fun place to like perform into because you've done everything to prepare for that moment. But when you're a professional on an 8-show a week tour that goes on for potentially, I mean, years,
it's still going.
It's
Yeah.
until you want to stop, right?
Mhm.
Or until your body makes you stop, one of the two.
Right.
But I mean, it's just you have to be able to show up, and I love that the reality is that for those people who've stepped onto stage, like stepped on to where the lights are bright, and it doesn't have to be a national tour, but anything where like there are people expecting you to be at your best, and that's what's amazing about how the body works and how we can truly show up when it matters. And oftentimes we can't show up for ourselves. Like you're sitting there behind the curtain, like holding on, like I could, like not knowing how you're going to muster the energy. But
Absolutely.
there's something about, and I think it's there's something about performers that have this even farther than most people have it. But it's like you step out there, the expectation is there, the people are looking at you, the lights are bright, the moment is there, and you cannot be but the person that you were meant to be.
Absolutely.
And it's like it pulls it from your big toe. Like it'll find the energy somewhere in the lower.
I mean, I'm like, it's like I kind of romanticize it a little bit, but it's like the show, your muse, whatever however you want to put it. There's something like, let me explain it to you this way. Like the communion between us as performers and the audience is like sacred almost. And so once you experience it, like from the first song, Circle of Life, going down the aisle, getting the opportunity to, pass through the audience, especially people who have no idea what's going to happen. Like people, they start to sense there's someone coming over their shoulder, and then they look and there's a rhinoceros, and seeing that, surprise and then that wonder, there's nothing like it. And from that moment on, it's like we make a pact. We're gonna have an experience together, and we're only the people in this room are going to experience what we're all going to experience together. This is our moment together to share, and it's sacred and beautiful. And so once you commit to that experience, then when you're off stage waiting for your cue and you're trying to figure out how the heck you're going to do the next thing, because you committed, it's like it's your job, it's your duty, it's your contribution to this experience. And so then something greater takes over, and suddenly you did it somehow. I hope that makes sense.
Totally. And I think too, you're like there's no show that's ever exactly the same, right? So that experience is unique in of the, like, you guys and the audience, that relationship, that connection, the theater, all the little variables create a singularity of a show that will never be seen again. And so
Absolutely.
Like living in that
That's
moment
true.
is where it's
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is many people will say, how can you do the same show, 8 shows a week for 6 years? And I was like, well, really, it was never the same. Every single time was different. Whether it was, even if we went to the same city twice, it would never be the same. Our dressers would be different. The backstage choreography would be different. The audience would be different. And that was something that was really fascinating to me. It felt like every city, the audience had a different character, a different vibe. For instance, it really seemed like the farther south you went, the more ruckus, the more, I don't know, engaged, wild the audience became. Like we were in, like every audience in Texas exploded at the end of Circle of Life. Just, hooting and hollering. I joke this way, and my friend who was from Texas was like, "Don't talk that way about Texas." But I was like, if I heard some guns firing like woo hoo hoo during Circle of Life during the blackout, I wouldn't have been surprised. They were like a hair away. Good gunfire, good gunfire.
but the up in the air stuff, like
yes, exactly. We like what you're doing, bang bang bang. Yeah, as you do in Texas, right? I think stereotypically, and so. But then, like, when you went to Miami, it was equally as excited. Not equally. They were into it, but then, like in Miami, it was the only place in the entire North American tour, where after Circle of Life, the big boom and then the darkness descends on the audience, the entire audience erupted in like photography flashes, taking pictures of us on stage. Like, it was the most insane and outrageous thing. You're not supposed to take pictures at all, and yet they so brazenly, the entire city of Miami decided, this is what we do here, and so we're going to take. It was like an unspoken pact. But then the farther north you went, then the more reserved they got. When we got into Canada, like Montreal, their audiences, it was like pulling teeth. They were so quiet. For the entire, they wouldn't laugh at any of the jokes, to the point where the audience, or to the like Timon and Pumbaa were like, we're dying out there. They're not giving us anything. And then at the end of the show, they would explode, and because they didn't want to miss any of the dialogue. It's just a completely different mindset. So different shows, no matter where.
It's like different audiences, like they represent their respect or their joy
in different ways.
Like,
yeah,
and that's like, but it's hard to read the ones that are like, respect and love means like quiet and like observant.
I mean, we prefer when we make a joke, the audience goes crazy, wild with laughter. That feeds us, and we can keep going. We're actors. We need that instant, gratification. Just gonna be honest.
Yes.
And what do you mean you enjoy the dialogue? You want to hear the writing? What about my joke? What about my delivery? Give me something.
What about that little look I gave the audience?
Right, exactly. Did anyone catch that? Moments like that, you can't describe it. You can't plan it. It's just shared in that moment. That's gold. And it's something I miss about. It's the thing that I love about theater, that you can only get there. I turn around and I realize I've done a lot of theater. In fact, right now, you asked me at the beginning of the podcast to talk about what I'm doing now. I just finished a run with the LA Opera, an opera called Omar, and it's we were the West Coast premiere, and it's basically about a slave in the 1800s who was he was a Muslim, and he was actually like a holy man, or I'm messing this up, but. Possibly. Thank you very much, Bart.
That's the West African term for holy man, but it may be something else. I mean, but they would call him a marabu or an imam.
Well, let's go with that.
Imam is
yes.
Okay.
They didn't use those words with us, but very well. But I'm
just trying to sound smart. Sorry.
I mean, you don't have to try very hard. But through his faith, he learned how to read Arabic writing. Man, my English is just gone. Speaking of all these other languages, but in the time, a black man in America, with slavery going on, blacks didn't know how to read. They weren't educated whatsoever. That was really important. So he was abducted into slavery and taken across the Atlantic and sold in South Carolina. And when he arrived in South Carolina, he had escaped this evil plantation owner and ended up in jail anyway because he was a runaway slave. And in his jail cell, he started writing his messages, his prayers to God in Arabic. Oh, man, I can't even speak English. And so that obviously stood out because black people, weren't educated enough to speak or write English, and suddenly this black man was writing in a language no one else could understand. And so through that, he was purchased by another benevolent plantation owner, and through that experience, he was able to then write his autobiography, which the opera was created from, and it's the only known autobiography of a slave and their experience during that period. It's in the Library of Congress right now, and hopefully more people will tell his story. But Michael Abels, the composer of the movies Get Out and Nope, and I think Us, he wrote this. He co-wrote this opera with this wonderful female. I'm forgetting her name now, but she's a black woman who is a multi-Grammy award winner, and she is also a banjo player, and she came up in like the South folk scene, and so she has that heritage. She brings that with her. But then she went to Juilliard, and I should know her name. She went to Juilliard as an opera singer. So she's got this folk and classical heritage, and then Michael Abels comes with his film scoring knowledge and brilliance, and they come together and they make this opera about a slave who turns out. I've recently gone through this genealogy stuff. Maybe I'll bring it up. It's kind of a whole different podcast. But in doing that, I learned that I actually have ancestors who were taken where Omar was taken, who did the journey across the Atlantic like Omar went across the Atlantic, were sold into slavery in South Carolina like Omar was sold into South Carolina. So that was quite an experience for me. It was like I was reliving in some fraction of a way what my ancestors had gone through 200 years ago. It's been an interesting journey. We closed about 3 weeks ago, and it was really life-changing. I hope I get to do other productions of it as it gets bigger, and I hope more people can see it, because it's what opera needs. It's opera for people who don't like opera. It was really fantastic.
Well, there's a great article about it in NPR that talks all about kind of the history. The guy's from Senegal, which is right where I live, like right in West Africa. Yeah,
and that's where my ancestors were from, Senegal.
Okay, and so I'll put that in the notes for those listening and want to find out a little bit more. I'll put that in the show notes, so you can click that link. That's very different from going to musical theater and more of the like fun Disney type stuff to dramatic opera. Just out of curiosity, was it like did they pull a lot of people from like outside of the opera world into the cast to really make it very rich with?
Well, it wasn't even so much like outside of the opera world as it was we all just went in and we auditioned, and they chose the voices that they liked, just like with all the other operas. And I am classically trained. Like, that's what I was training when you and I were in school together. So every now and then I dust off my classical chops and I put some extra vibrato in it the way that they like. But
are you still a baritone?
Oh, definitely. I'm always going to be a baritone, my friend. Always. I mean, it's the best part. Really.
You haven't found your tenor chops.
No. I have tenor moments.
You pull a Andrew Savonsky.
No, sir.
Tenor.
See, he was a tenor all the time, and he just didn't. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, but I'm a baritone. I'm definitely a baritone. Yeah. Which actually, it's funny because you think about it. If we could sing lower, we would be basses. If we could sing higher, we'd be tenors. But we're like in between. We get the throwaway parts, like the basses. Are you a bass or a baritone? You're bass.
I'm baritone. I'm not a baritone.
Okay, all right.
I have like super low notes, but like my range wants to be in that kind of like middle baritone range. Like I have G's if I really go into like I really push it, but
right.
And I have like A flat, or I have an A below low C, but where my voice really like resonates, it's baritone.
You have you say that again. You have a what below middle C?
I have an A below low C.
So and that's like basso profundo. That's like
but it doesn't really. My dad had that too, but it's like I remember doing like vocal like arpeggio or just working the range of the low register, and he could sing all the way down to like an A or B flat.
Wow.
And but it's not like a full sound. It's a
But you phonate. You
note.
make sound.
I mean, it's a note. It's a note.
Right.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is just as the voice matures and like settles into that kind of like gravitas of the this kind of comfortable range, it gets lower. But I remember a tenor in college who could hit a low C, and there was nobody thought he was a bass. It was just that he could create that note.
See, I don't know, man. When I hear that you can sing that low, I mean, you're one of those lucky people, I guess. Your range is huge, really. Even if it's not loud, it exists. I think one time I got paid to hit a low D flat in a session, and it was like I had to not move. I'd just be like, totally nobody touch me, or it's not going to happen. Totally focused on trying to phonate and make some kind of vibration with my vocal cords down there. So when I that you can go down there, even if it's not loud, I bow down. That's rather awesome.
It's so funny. I remember caring so much about my range when I was younger, like in my 20s, and I would like, work so hard to get a high range, and I wanted to have this low notes, and all that matters. And it was like because you want to like unleash the full potential of your voice. And
Right,
like
right.
now at 47, I just want to have a great quality. Like I just want to have like
Cheers.
an octave and a half where I can
Right,
just like
right.
sing some songs and
Workable,
like, a workable
that could
octave and a
be.
half, 2 octaves maybe.
That's like a metaphor for life. When you're younger, it's like you've got
Oh,
to,
so
these
much.
lofty ambitions. Some are feasible, some are not. Some are just ridiculously impossible and out of reach. And as you get older, you start to gain perspective about, I could break my neck doing this or that, or, trying to be everything for everyone, or I can just find what makes me happy and content and find my lane and drive it well. There's something to be said for
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And and if you make it into being a professional singer or like you've got to be able to nail a lane and be very like, just consistent so that people can hire you and say, I know
right,
Tonoccus can hit this out of the park every time. I
right,
don't
right,
need him
right,
to be anything else. I just need him to
right.
do this
It,
really, really well. And
it's interesting
that's
because
what makes a career actor.
you're actually really astute on this point, and it's something that I've recently had to wrap my head around. Believe it or not, I mean, in some areas I've known it, but I've resisted it. For instance, like I said, that I'm a jack of all trades because I truly am interested in many things. But I've recently recommitted to my acting career, TV, film
Hmm.
stuff, because stage stuff, it's there. It's just in an opera. But to act in film and television, it's a completely different beast. And to go from theater to TV and film, it's a different style of performing. To explain it for people who might not understand, if you think about it, on stage, you've got to perform in such a manner so that someone in the rafters will understand exactly the emotion, what's going on. So I'm going to make fun of my musical theater friends, but you can tell a musical theater person because they're like bigger and they walk in and they, fill up a room, and, that's
A
what
lot
we
of
love about them.
hands,
Yeah, exactly.
big
Because,
gestures.
because they're
Yeah.
like, life is their stage and they're just, it's, you can just tell that
Yeah.
musical theater vibe. But if you did that on TV and film, like, you would think that person was insane. Like, why is this person calm down, So the way it was explained to me, don't think about projecting to the top of the rafters. Think about whispering in my ear and making me understand.
Mm.
And for me, it's so scary because when I go into my reflex mode, this is what acting feels like when I'm in this zone. It's way too big. It's way too big. So when I bring it down to when my teacher's like, that's it. That's what we want. That's perfect. It feels like I'm not doing anything. Like, I can't be entertaining right now because I'm not, making you see that I'm happy from a mile away. Um, it's it was also explained, if you feel the emotion inside, that's all it takes. You don't have to say, I'm really happy. But if you're happy, that will project itself. It's a weird concept,
Right.
and
The camera
it's
can pick
terrifying.
up on those little subtleties.
Yeah, yeah, seriously, it's terrifying if you go in and you're mugging in front of a camera like this. You look like a crazy person. So that's great inspiration to just kind of dial it back. But I'm trying to remember why I started going down this. Oh yes, because
Yeah. TV
as
film.
as I've been focusing on this TV film stuff, I committed to doing the whole headshots thing, and because up until now, whenever I got headshots, it was for musical theater or it was for music or things like that. And you can get by with like generic, just this is an attractive, hopefully attractive black man. He's bald. Hire him. Whereas with TV film, they want to know who I am, and a generic, just attractive headshot wasn't cutting it. It wasn't getting me auditions, anything like that. They didn't know who they would be inviting into. They didn't know what scripts, what characters to send to my agent based on what I was getting. So I had to start getting more specific about I had to start making sure that my headshots captured who I am better. and that meant getting more specific about the lane I wanted to be in as an actor. And as my career started growing, then I can start adding these other flavors that I'm capable of as well. But in the beginning, it's just got to be choose a lane and stick in it. And so it's just interesting that you brought that up, because that's something that I've been meditating on.
Well, I think too, when we as we mature, it's like, I think early on we just want to be hot, like, you know,
Right.
the
That's
better
all it takes,
looking.
right?
I went to New York City with this like Superman headshot, like
Wow.
it was literally
Right.
like
Ba-da-bum.
strong jaw,
Right.
like I just probably got back from the gym,
I
like
love
it
it.
was
If
it
you
was
got it,
like,
flaunt it. I love it.
well, and it was it was an impressive headshot,
Hmm.
but who cares? Like
Right.
you couldn't understand anything about like the soul of me by
Right.
looking at that headshot, other than like, oh, this guy probably has a lot of like baggage around like wanting to look like it, like a superhero. Well, you
Not
know what I mean? Like,
baggage. Not baggage.
no, of course, but you know, you want people, and I loved my interview with Andrew. He really talked about how he struggled with like showing who he really was, because he's such a good looking guy. It's just so easy to ride that one note of
Right.
being. For me, it's like I'm 6'4", I'm 220, I look very impressive. Hire me for that,
Right.
as opposed to like, I have all these unique like qualities to my personality and the sensitivity mixed with the fact that I'm, this size, that I think is a really much more interesting thing that I think we discover as we get older. Like we
I
discover
agree.
like those things are really like the reason why, like, you can, I'm at 47, like I'm, I still try to look good, but I'm not trying to lead with this
I'm just gonna say, I
like
hope I look like you when I'm
persona.
47. I mean, seriously, dude, come on. You're great. Come in. Come on.
Well,
Um,
thank you. But I mean,
Absolutely.
but you get the idea. It's like,
Of
it's
course.
just like, you realize that there's so much more depth. And if you're a casting director, or you're sitting in a audition and you've got a stack of 300, headshots,
Hmm.
and you're like,
And they're all Superman
oh
poses.
God.
Right. So
Yeah.
how are you going to
Like,
stand out?
yeah. And it's like, so finding that thing that like, man, I don't know what it is about Tanaka, this picture of this guy, but there's something interesting. Like there's
Yeah.
something deeper than just like a pretty face, right? Like,
And I was
and I
actually
think that's,
afraid, growing up in the early part of my career, I was afraid of doubling down on what made me unique. And it turns out that's exactly what you're supposed to do to stand out. I thought, I want to look like all the other black guys my age who are doing this. I want to be, you know, the same, which is, I don't know why you'd start thinking that way, because in the long run, it's totally detrimental. But for some reason, maybe an acceptance thing, or to combat the imposter syndrome. You don't really belong here. You're not like them. Yes, I am. I've got a headshot just like the rest of them, so I belong. But now I realize, no, it's your quirks. It's the little Tonoccus isms that make you different and unique. That helps them realize which character they want you to come and audition for. Shows them who you are before you walk into the room. And so
yeah.
I think I was just taught to. Actually, I think I hit it on its head. The imposter syndrome. I hear that I'm not the only one in the world who struggled with imposter syndrome, but
Everybody.
for me it was right, exactly. And so, just breaking away from that, having faith in yourself, and trusting. You've done the work. You've been doing this for a long enough time, and there's a reason why you're here, and it's not because all the dumb reasons in your head, but because you have talent and value and something to contribute, and just have faith in that. And it's almost like a leap of faith in what makes you you. In the end, that's what
Yeah.
will get you further than running the opposite direction, like our first instinct might tell us to do. I guess, if that makes sense.
It does, and it makes me think that like not every, but most people in their 20s and in early 30s, like they're going through this place where they're trying to be this version of themselves that they think is the most like presentable, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
how society works. If we were all
Right.
going around just being completely ourselves, we'd have a bunch of crazy people out there, right? Like
Right.
there's a reason
Well, we
why
do have a bunch
society
of
is kind of
crazy
built
people out there,
around.
but
There's
fair.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean, I think, and so it's almost like for the young artist out there who's listening to this, who's like, what should you take from this? I'll ask you what what you think, because I feel like you have a better perspective. But looking back, I think like it's not about being. I mean, sure, if you could just be completely authentic and like vulnerable and let this uniqueness out, that's kind of hard to do, like flick a switch. But if you can have awareness around that's what we are all trying to do, and if you have self-awareness about like that's what people do, and so if you
Right.
can learn how you do that and like the ways that you try to like put your best foot forward or create a headshot
Right.
that was like that's
Right.
a very important part of the human condition that illuminates coming of age. It illuminates this struggle in us, like, do I want to be myself, but I also feel like I have to be this for other
Right.
people,
Right. It's
right?
an interesting tightrope walk, and it also depends on what kind of career you want to have, which I learned the hard way. Disney's The Lion King, corporate theater. There are some things that I absolutely will treasure for the rest of my life, and there's some things that I will not. And hopefully I can delete from my memory as quickly as possible. Part of that was it's very much a show that existed. Like the show is the star. The stars are not the star of the show. The Lion King, the characters, Mufasa, Simba, Nala, they are the stars. And we just happen to embody it for this audience in this moment in time. So it was tricky for me as an artist to basically realize I'm a cog in a wheel of a machine that's been going before me and will be going after me. After we used to joke, after nuclear holocaust, there will be cockroaches, Twinkies, and the Lion King. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to be the same thing. And so
That was the best.
right, Howard. And so you are under an extreme amount of pressure to conform, to be the function that you provide to the show. The reason why you were hired, they don't want individuality. And for someone who is trying to discover and nurture his individuality, that can be it can end up being kind of toxic after a while if you don't have your head screwed on right. And so towards the end, I was definitely going through a period where I was like, be careful what you wish for. You wanted to get into the show. I auditioned for the show for 10 years. And I finally got in as Bonsai, his understudy. And I was on cloud 9, but then I realized, whoa, there are so many other aspects to this, even more than the 8-show-a-week situation, the corporate expectation, the almost, well, we're just gonna talk straight, right?
Let's go.
Right. The duplicity of some of the management and the people from New York, who there's something about Disney, and I say this having had a robust career working for the mouse. I joke that I'm Mickey's bitch. I don't know if we can curse on your, but I joke that
Bring
way
it.
because like my entire career, like I came out to LA after doing Channel 1 News as a journalist. That's what I was doing when we first met. And it was affiliated with ABC, which is affiliated with Disney. Then my first hosting jobs were like doing backstage tours as a tour guide for Disneyland and California Adventure. They're on YouTube right now. They're hilarious. I'll send you a link. It's hilarious. But so that's definitely for the mouse. And then all these other things where Disney, and then I was in like 5 shows at Disneyland, and then I was in Disney's The Lion King. So, and then I was in like the Lion King, The Lion Guard soundtrack, and then the movie came out, and I'm featured roles in that. And so it's like Disney, and then Lion King, Disney, Lion King, Disney. So the mouse has been very good to me, but I've also been in his back pocket for pretty much my entire career. So it's awkward for me to say some of these things, but I've seen many sides, many faces of Disney. And when you work in entertainment, you're expected to get stabbed in the back. I mean, it's rough. That's a harsh kind of reality, but you have to choose your friends very carefully, and you never know when that next stab in the back is going to come. Yay. I hope I'm not scaring people away from this life, because it's really rewarding. It's very rewarding, but this is one of the
But
negatives.
that's people, like, I mean, you can substitute like corporate America for Disney, and you still
Hmm.
have, like, anytime there's a hierarchy, and anytime people are
Right.
like vying for the producer or the director's attention or whatever, you're going
Hmm.
to have that. Like, people are just
Right.
people, right?
So people
And
will be able to
there's the
relate to
good,
this.
that bad, and the ugly,
But I
right?
will say there's something special about Disney. I think it's a
There's
little worse. It's a little worse
oh
because you're right. Because with regular jobs, it's like, oh, and here's the stab in the back. I was wondering when you'd show up. All right, let's get this over with. But with Disney, they're like, we love you. We're happy. Come give me a hug. We love you. We're family. And so you give them a hug, and then you're like, what's that stabbing in the back? Oh, so it's almost like they get you to lower your guard, and then right through the ribs. I don't know.
yeah.
So I've had great experiences. Whoever's out there listening, I've had wonderful experiences, and I'm grateful for all of them. But I also acknowledge maybe someone should rethink the concept of corporate theater. Theater for I don't know. It just didn't jive well. So when I
Yeah.
finished my time at The Lion King when it was over, I was really kind of messed up in the head, because I had been crammed into this shape for so long that wasn't me, and to the point where I wasn't even sure who I was for a while. I think we spoke a little bit. I stopped working out. Just didn't. I was aimless. I didn't really know which direction to go in, and so I kind of focused on what made me happy, because that was all I could really trust during that period, and like teaching, arranging. Towards the end, when things were really getting weird, like I developed this syndrome. It's actually called a syndrome. Towards the end of my tour time, I went on tour not being allergic to anything, and about 4 years into it, I became allergic to everything, which was insane. And it was it's like pollen and food something syndrome. Wherever something touches my body, it would become inflamed. And so every flower, every mold, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but I swear there's a through line for this.
It feels very, very linear to me. So
Okay,
it's great. Keep going.
great. Every flower, every mold, every moss, everything that grew on planet Earth, suddenly I was allergic to it. And when I say mold, I mean in all these old theaters where the Lion King was, being put up, there's always a mold in every theater that we ever go into, and I was allergic to that mold as well. So it was like clockwork. I'd be fine for about the first 4 days, and then the fifth day of breathing in that mold, my vocal cords would become inflamed, and so suddenly I was like having vocal problems. Like, my high notes would go away. And I started thinking, am I losing my voice? Am I going to be able to keep my job? I signed a contract that said I had to do 8 shows a week. And how can you do 8 shows a week when your body is not doing what it's supposed to be doing? You don't understand what's going on. Turns out I had the syndrome. So I got help for that, and it helped me navigate through that. But in the meantime, I'm just what that goes back to when you are asking yourself, if I can't sing, if I can't do what I always thought I was supposed to do, who am I? So during those times, I doubled down into things that made me happy. If I couldn't trust my voice, then what makes me happy? Going into schools and teaching students and arranging for benefits and trying to raise money for good causes, and anything else that I knew I could still do that fed me, and I felt like I was contributing, then I doubled down in that. So when I left the tour, and I still, was searching, who am I? What just happened? Can someone please, screw my head back on correctly? I just went back to those things, teaching. Through my work session singing, I had met this guy, David, and he, David Joyce, and he just happened to be the music director at the Los Angeles College of Music. And so I went to him and I was like, David, I just want to kind of get back with students, how can I contribute? And so through him, I started substitute teaching at the Los Angeles College of Music, sight reading and stuff. And that fed me. And, just when you're lost, just listen to that voice, listen to what makes you happy, and that will be your compass. And suddenly things started materializing from that. I'll always remember I was on Facebook, and I know social media is horrible, but it's actually been really good for me. Understanding it's evil and the worst, but But when you go into it knowing that, then you can use it for your benefit. And so I will always remember one day on like Facebook Messenger getting a message from this strange message, this woman in China saying, yeah, we want to have you come to China and speak to our students in our 5 campuses in the School of International Art. I thought it must be, what is it, a scam or something like that? It couldn't be true. How did you find me? What are you talking about? Turns out they were looking for people to fly to their schools and talk to the students about auditioning, performing to get into colleges. And more specifically, in their culture, they're not used to performing so openly, to emoting, to really putting it all on stage, and walking away. It's very refined, very contained. And so they were looking for people who can come to their schools in China and help them break free so that they have a better chance at auditioning into American schools. So they went to the website of the Los Angeles College of Music, and they were going through all of the faculty and looking at all of our resumes, and they saw me, and they saw that I'd been on tour with the Lion Kings for 6 years, and they were like, this guy is exactly who we want. So it wasn't fake, it was actually the real deal, and because of who I am and all of my experiences, that was perfect for that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get flown to China to do a lecturing tour across mainland China, teaching students, I know, insane, teaching students how to just exist and not be afraid to emote and perform, It's well, for me, it's common sense things like when you're singing, I'm really sad, then really be sad. For me, it's, like common sense, but for them, making the connection, oh, so you're saying when I am singing about looking in the sky with wonderment, to look and be amazed, making the connection between what they're saying and what they're doing on stage, it's just not natural for many of those kids. And so I will always remember going over there, and I will always remember my first class with the students, that moment when it clicked and you saw them discover something right before your very eyes. I was like, this is meant to be. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and, just have faith. This is, the proof is right there. And then one of the parents came afterwards, after one of my lectures, and he said, you know what, I really found your lecture really interesting. And I mean, just indescribable, things like that. And it would have never happened if I hadn't just doubled down on what made me happy, have faith in yourself, and doubled down on what makes me, me. And it was enough, more than enough. So I guess we're talking about kids that want to come up and try to do what I'm doing. It took me 25 years to realize it. Turns out what makes me unique is my superpower. And so don't try to gloss over it. Don't try to run from it, but embrace it, make a headshot, build a headshot around it, and that'll be enough. That'll be enough.
I love that. God, that's what an experience too. Because, I've never been to China, but I can imagine kind of what you're talking about, like the desire to be perfect. I mean, they, like think about like kind of the quintessential like 4 or 5-year-old young Korean or Chinese pianist who's diligently learning the notes, but like hasn't necessarily figured out how to put the feeling into the music. Like they're really technically gifted, or that. Yeah,
exactly. That's absolutely,
and like that concept. Yeah.
And you can't really, I
remember that there was a couple of singers from of Asian descent that were in the opera department, and that was kind of feedback that they would get is kind of let out, like let us feel what you're feeling or what you're saying, and I think everyone has that, but I think if you're going to a different culture, that's a culture that doesn't necessarily understand that the way we do, and so your ability to kind of really make an impact in that moment must have been huge.
I will say that many of the students, I even if it was minutely, there was some shift, or just the fact that the concept was introduced at all. It might have been the first time in their lives when when they were encouraged to take down that wall or that mask or be vulnerable or, let people in, which, I mean, it was just really lovely to experience. And I don't know, it happened right before COVID, actually. So, I was there October of 2019, and COVID happened November or December. So sadly, that China doesn't exist anymore. I was one of the last people to see China before all this insanity started. But
wow.
And actually, the woman who brought me over there, she had me do a video for the kids because they were really under a lot of fire, like internationally. The world was kind of down on these Chinese kids, with the Wuhan stuff. Just encouraging them and say, don't listen again. Don't listen to the outside. You're amazing, and that you didn't bring about the pandemic, but that's going to a different conversation. But just who you are is enough. It's interesting. I'm sorry, I just started thinking about the pandemic, and it was a lovely time.
No. I mean, you think about. It's so easy when a culture or a country is so far away, we can kind of one them into, oh, well, China's responsible for this or that's, but there are individual human beings over there who, have all of the same aspirations of life and for the artists that you got a chance to talk to, that the trajectory of their life in that moment, meeting you, and then how COVID must have derailed so much for so many people.
I wish those kids the best. They were up, who knows? It was rough for everyone around the world, but to be a kid during that in the epicenter. But we're all taking it a day at a time. Anyway, I'm sorry.
No,
the pandemic strikes
again. This is
again.
what the whole Look, let me tell you something. The whole reason for a podcast is so that we can get to something that's real. I can go online and read your bio, right? I want to hear what you got right here. The 25 plus years as a professional, singer actor has made you realize about yourself, about the business. But let's take a bit of a comic break here.
Okay.
Because there's such a fun moment, and the last time I actually saw you, which is kind of crazy, it's over 10 years. Absolutely. Well, you've already kind of thrown Disney under the bus a little bit, so I don't feel like we're not gonna ruin your reputation here.
Oh, so ruin it anymore.
No. I think on some level, for some people will hear this story and be like, really? Right before a show? Other people will be like, dude, this guy's ballsy. It's going to go one or two ways. But let me set the stage. We came to your show the night before. So it was probably a Friday night we came, and then it was a Saturday because you didn't have a matinee. It was only an 8 o'clock show.
Then that would have been 7. During the week, I think. Because
maybe it was maybe we came to a Thursday.
Yeah.
And then it was a Friday show or something like that. Okay, so we come to the show the night before, so I had just seen it, so I had just known oh my god, it's awesome and all this, and I knew I knew how physical you had to be, and then we met down at Vespaio, this Italian restaurant on South Congress. I remember it like it was yesterday, and we order a drink, have some amazing lunch, and you're like, where are we going to next? I'm like, well, I think there's an absinthe bar down on South 4th, right? Yeah. So we go downtown.
Yeah.
We go downtown. We hit the absinthe bar. I can't remember what it's called, but it's still there. It's still the whole there's 3 restaurant or kind of restaurant bars right in a row. But there, and so we start drinking. It's I don't know how close it is to actual absinthe, but we started drinking absinthe, and then we went all over downtown. 6th Street. It's 3, 4 in the afternoon.
Well, let me just pause. Let me just
I don't
pause.
drink.
Exactly. I just have to say, because Bart, you're 6'4", and I'm 5'11". So and he's always been this statuesque dude, solid. And I remember distinctly trying to warn you about tour liver, because we don't have anything to do with our days except drink. Or, then I work out before my show and I, whatever, have my process. But we're professional drinkers, and so when I think you were like playfully, like you were kind of jocking each other. Oh, I'll drink you under the table, and I was like, no, I'll drink you under the table. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, you'll see. There's only one way that Bart will learn, and he'll have to learn the hard way. So we went out, and I will say the absinthe was an unusual twist. Because I think I'd had absinthe one other time in my life. So it was an interesting kind of different flavor. But, I was quite in my element with the alcohol, whereas you
were not fazed by
anything. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was, I felt something, but.
Yeah, we went to a lot of really cool bars. You were clearly outpacing me the whole time. I tried to keep up. I felt very confident I was going to be able to keep up. I did not.
And then I think you're.
I remember. Go ahead. No, what do you? I want to know what you remember.
Your wife had to come and get you. Did you like?
That's absolutely true. I ended up at the W Hotel because I think we split. You took a cab up to. I don't know if Ubers were around back then, but you took a cab up to the Bass Concert Hall.
Right.
Yeah, and I was like, I think I walked to the W because I knew that my wife would know where that is, and so yeah, I got to the W, and I think I just walked inside, and I was like, oh, the room was spinning. Wow. I threw up in the bathroom. Yeah, it was bad.
Cheers,
cheers. Bad.
But I think, to be fair, and I got my just desserts. I mean, and I went. I did the Lion King.
Yeah, that's here I am vomiting in the toilet at the W, waiting for my wife to pick me up. And all I can think about is Tonoccus is about to go perform 2.5 hours of the Lion King.
I sure am.
Tilt.
I sure am. And I did. And it was great.
Without a hitch.
I mean,
I'm sure you were inspired.
Yeah, exactly. More so than normal. There's a twinkle in my eye that, isn't normally there. But the way that I get through it is part of my regiment is I get to the theater 2 hours before every performance, and I do my insanity workouts, or I do my P90X, or whatever I'm doing, whatever program I'm in that moment. And on top of getting my body to the point where I can be in the Lion King 8 shows a week without expiring, it also makes me sweat out. So let's say I had a 3 martini lunch. I will sweat it out, and it will focus me, and I will be where I need to be. And also, when I was having vocal problems, my whole body being so warmed up doing those workouts, it also warmed up my voice in a way so that I could phonate and do the things I needed to do until I figured out what was going on with that syndrome. So there were no negatives when I decided to include my workout every day, 6 days a week, before I did the show. And actually doing like Insanity and P90X and all of those workouts for 6 days a week, because we had double show days on the weekends, but 6 days a week for 6 years totally transformed my body. So like reset it to the point where when I was in Los Angeles and kind of floundering around fitness wise and not really interested in doing anything physical at all, my body still retained for the most part. Like right now, I mean, I haven't gained tons of weight, or I lost the weight the little bit but even when I gained weight, no one really knew, because I changed my frame to the point where I'd like reset Tonoccus because of that foundation.
You had an athletic frame.
Yeah. Who knew under all that band nerd choir geek stuff, there's potential for an athletic frame. Thank you, Lion King. 8 shows a week of the Lion King and 6 days a week doing Insanity, and suddenly your body resets. Who knew?
Yeah, no, look, I realized that you were just at a whole different level at that game than I was. But I think it was such a, first of all, it was such a fun day.
Absolutely.
Such a fun afternoon.
From what you remember.
I literally have, it's not something I do very often. So like, that was just like a green light to just like, I'm showing Tonoccus the city. Let's just go everywhere. Let's experience everything. And
I'm honored that you felt comfortable enough with me to let your hair down, as it were. Yeah, rock on, man.
Yeah.
It was one of the better days of my tour.
Right. And then,
Yeah.
rewind another like 10 years before that,
Oh my
maybe
goodness.
20,
Oh my goodness.
Prague.
I was gonna say, are you can bring it up this
So
Prague? Wow.
I was in, no, like no crazy details, but like
Hmm.
I was in the south of France, and I traveled up to Prague with my friend Dominic, and we met you and Andrew and the whole Northridge Singers Choir in
Right.
Prague at the St. Charles
Wow.
Bridge,
That was,
and
I
then
mean,
just proceeded to party like three
like
days
we were
straight.
like we were in our early 20s,
I think
just
we were actually.
right, exactly. There's
It
nothing
was a
like being
beautiful
in
thing.
like being in your 20s in Prague with all of your buddies.
Oh
That was
my
a
God,
magical time.
it really
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you, youth is wasted on the young. I've heard that my entire life, but you just if I would share anything with any other people listening, and I know this it's going to sound dumb, but really just appreciate where you are now, because,
Mm.
if you're always thinking about where you want to be and my life will be better if this happens or that happens, there are wonderful things happening in your life today that you just appreciate because you're going to look back and be like, you know what? I really was skinnier than I thought I was, or you know what? I had this going and I took it for granted. Try not, this life is fleeting, it really is going by so fast. And so just take a moment to appreciate where you are now and what you have now, because it's not forever. And
Mm.
you're going to wish that you had taken the moment in the future. I guarantee it. And we had a wonderful time, like in Northridge Singers in Prague that summer, going around Germany, then going on to like Italy and Spain, falling in love, and then getting my heart broken, all these horrible things. And I think that's when I ended. I got fired from Channel One while I was on that. Oh man, horrible, but wonderful at the same time. I wouldn't change a thing. Just
Yeah.
just appreciate it because it's all fleeting. It's just you never know what tomorrow's going to be. So pay attention to today.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. I forgot you guys had more of that tour because we met you guys there, and then it was Lee Ferris, Andrew, and then my friend Dominic and I, we broke off and we met in south of France like a few weeks later, and then, because I think you guys had just done Italy, and then we went off to Morocco together. We
No,
did like
actually, so
we shot
Morocco.
out to Morocco. Yeah.
Morocco. Okay, man, I'd love to go there. Actually, Prague was the last stop on the tour for Northridge Singers. We
Was
had been
it?
in Germany, and then we ended in Prague.
Okay.
And then I had family in Germany, so I went there for like 2 weeks to get my mom to wash my laundry. Then I went on like for 2 months. I was off like to Italy, to France, to Switzerland, to Germany, by myself. And then I ended up wrapped up the summer joining the World Youth Choir in Spain for a month, and then fell in love. And Paul Smith, our
Wow.
director, was there. He was the
Yeah.
assistant conductor. That's how I found out about it, and he said you should audition. So another girl from Northridge Singers and I, and another American in Chicago, we represented America in the World Youth Choir in Spain that summer. And
No,
what a
that's
summer.
amazing.
Yeah, just going around and being young
Yeah.
and being dumb and not caring, and that's what you should experience. I'm a strong supporter of like being young and dumb and living and making mistakes and like that. It was wonderful.
One of the things that somebody made the point that uh, not enoughness, like I'm not enough, right? That can send people very different directions. One of them is like drugs, alcohol, and addiction, and the other is like addicted to becoming enough, being so super driven that you're always looking for that next thing to validate you that you're enough, right? Or that
Right,
somebody that you want to believe that you're enough sees you in that place. And
right,
so like people that have that desire to be enough and so use that to motivate them to become super athletes or
right,
super performers or super wealthy, like those, that can be a driver, but it can also do exactly what you're talking about, which is
right.
you miss the juice. Like you're
Yeah,
so it's so much about the squeeze of
right.
life. Like I got to get everything out of it. I got to get to where I need to go. There's so much pressure that we forget that like there's something beautiful happening in that moment. Like
In right
that time
before
in
our eyes.
Europe, that time in Europe is a perfect example of like we're all young, we all have these like beautiful dreams, these talents that we're trying to like see if that becomes something, but we're like traveling and meeting people and falling in love and breaking our hearts and like, and just letting those things just be the story. You know, I mean, it wasn't about like anything we did in Morocco other than like, we just decided we're going to go to Morocco, we're going to go to the desert. And it was like all of the crazy adventures, you know, along the way that made up this incredible story.
It's like my high school choir teacher would say, the music you're listening to right now is the music you're going to love for the rest of your life. And we're like, oh, this stuff? That's so dumb. And turns out, like, you look back and it's like, oh, yeah, I've loved that song for 25 years or something. You don't realize the significance of the moment until way past the moment. And my goal is to kind of get rid of that period. I want to be as present and as appreciative in the moment as possible during the moment. And I think that means you're appreciating your life. You know, if you're driving and you're too busy staring in the rearview mirror, then you know you're going to miss what's ahead of you, and that could be, well, that could be horrible. So just keep your eyes, pay attention to where you are, because it's enough. You know, you'll see, kids. You'll see one day what I'm talking about. Maybe not today, but hopefully one day. No, absolutely.
Here's a crass way to put it. You got one foot in the past, one foot in the future, and you're pissing all over the present. I don't know who told me that when I was like,
I love it. I mean, that should be a t-shirt.
Like, I love
absolutely.
Yeah. This has been absolutely amazing. Amazing.
I agree.
Amazing. Really catching up with you. You know, I love when like, I feel like I got to see like the heart of who you are, how you feel about things. And like, you know, I mean, this conversation could go on another couple hours and I would love that.
Right.
But I think for the audience, I feel like this is a perfect place to wrap it up. But I'm going to put some links in the show notes. People can check your out, like the YouTube of you doing a tour at Disneyland. Or
oh my goodness!
Any like clips of you singing. That I'll try to send me some stuff. We'll put it in the show notes just so people can kind of dive in and see more of you that way. But
do, brother.
Man, it was so much fun.
That's a wrap. Hey, great episode with Tonoccus. Hope there were some takeaways for you. If you love this stuff, check out the show notes. There's some YouTube videos, some things that you can get a little more information about Tonoccus and what he's up to. Also, of course, about the Endure Tour, which is a tour that I'll be a part of in the springtime. So check out the show notes, share this with a friend, and make sure, my goodness, let people know about this awesome podcast and the people that I'm getting to interview here. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Forge podcast.